Hey, folks, good evening, and thanks for joining me on Phantoms and Monsters Radio. I want to welcome all new listeners and members to the channel, as well as first timers in the chat. Now, over the years, I've received many shocking and unimaginable encounter reports from people on holiday who were simply trying to relax and enjoy their limited time away from home and work. Now, tourists and vacationers must be wary of local lore and tradition just in case they run up against something that's beyond their comprehension or their willingness to perceive. Now, some of the world's most popular tourist destinations have enduring mysteries that still perplex researchers and investigators to this day. Taking a trip to a new destination is always exciting, as well as a bit uneasy, especially if it leads to a frightening and traumatic incident that the tourist wasn't expecting. So, before I go any further, I want to mention that this channel is made possible by you clicking on the subscribe and like buttons and by sharing our programming. If you're watching on YouTube, super chat and super thanks donations are appreciated. If you click the dollar icon located below the chat box, other donation links are also shown in the description. Now, thanks for your consideration. Your comments are always welcome. Tell me which accounts you find interesting in the presentation and suggestions for upcoming shows. I want to again thank our moderators, Bernadette, Marla, Thomas, and Mike, as well as Kevin and Mary at ESP. Now, if you're in the chat and you have a question, please use all caps, and we'll try to get to each one of them after the presentation. So, this first witness states that in July of 2011, my wife and I were on a short vacation in Cape May, New Jersey. We were staying at a B&B on Beach Avenue with a view of the sea. I was asleep when I was awakened by something. I opened my eyes and saw two beings standing at the foot of the bed. It was dark, but there was adequate light coming in from the street for me to see them very clearly. I estimate that they were between 4.5 to 5 foot tall because I could only see them from the waist up. They were identical in every way. They were wearing black or dark green form-fitting outfits that resembled scuba diving dry suits. These included snug hoods that extended from the back of their necks over the top of their skulls. Now, on their upper chest was a rectangular gold or bronze colored plate about 4 by 5 inches with two rows of inscribed symbols or buttons on them. It resembled an instrument touchpad of some sort. They were no more than 6 feet from my face, and they were both staring right at me. It was a cool, appraising look. It's the look a cat might give you. Their crania were very large, perhaps twice as large as a man. But it was their faces that got me. They had huge wraparound black eyes set above high cheekbones. Their skin appeared coppery or orange in color. I couldn't detect a well defined mouth or nose, but along the rim of their jaw and down to their chins was some type of organ like structure. Were they gills, mandibles? I'm not sure. I couldn't see their hands, so I couldn't say how many digits they had. As I say, I had a very clear view of them. Now, when I realized that this was not a dream, I propped myself up on my elbows to get a better view. Strange, but I felt no fear. I was about to say something when I got this very clear thought. Something is wrong. He sees us. I suddenly became extremely sleepy. I tried to fight the urge to lie back down, but it was of no use. I felt my eyes closing, and that was it. The next thing I knew, it was morning, and I was awakened by the sunlight streaming in through the balcony door. Now, once my wife was awake, I asked her how she had slept, and she said she had the best night's sleep she had had in a while, no dreams. This isn't the first time in my life that I've had what could be called nocturnal visitations. As a child and teenager, they were very frequent and often terrifying. As an adult, they tapered off to the point where I chalked up my youthful experiences to dreams, hormones, flights of fancy, etc. I had even stopped thinking about them, but this is the first time as an adult that I had such an unambiguous sighting of these creatures. If one thing stands out, it's the sense of almost military precision and discipline that I got from them. It's hard to explain, but I got the feeling that these were no nonsense men who had a job to do and followed orders to the letter. They were not there to be my friend or to tell me any of the universe's secrets. They were under orders and would no sooner go against them than would one of our own Navy SEALs. And one last thing, they were extremely confident and felt not the slightest fear towards me. I'm sure of that. Now, this next witness states, we don't know what we saw. In the summer of 2014, we were in the Dominican Republic staying at a locally owned hotel. It was a nice hotel, but nothing luxurious, and a very open air sort of place. We had gone out for dinner and enjoyed a bottle of wine, but weren't drunk or anything. I'm reading in bed, and my husband comes out of the bathroom completely white faced in shock. There's a spider in the bathroom. I look at him and laugh. Spiders in Dominican Republic are big, but nothing to freak over. He looked like he had seen Satan himself by his expression, so I go into the bathroom. All I see are four thick, hairy, orange and black legs coming out of the sink basin. They were at least 10 inches long and at least as thick as pencils. Very hairy, from about 5 feet away, and I could see the separate orange and black hairs. I'm short, so I couldn't see the whole thing over the sink from the distance I was at. There was a towel blocking direct view from the sink. But just by the legs I knew I was looking at something almost 2 foot long, and definitely was a spider. I calmly walked back to my husband. Did you see it? Did you see it? I nodded, and we leave the room to get help from the front desk. Now, our broken Spanish had the staffers in hysterical laughter, not to mention that they took as overreacting to tourists scared of a little spider. One staffer, Jose, came to look, and it was gone. So Jose tells us he has at least three in his home, which in when I realize that these people either don't believe me or don't understand what I'm saying. I've lived in tropical climates before. There's no way in hell you'd share a home with a spider we saw. So a day later, We have a normal spider infestation. I go to the desk and ask for bug spray. The staffers are still laughing at our expense, but the same guy, Jose, comes up with me with the spray. We are cleaning out up the spiders, which were about 5 inches or so, daddy long leg type. He is surprised that I'm suddenly not scared by these spiders. He asked why, and I informed him that these spiders aren't what we saw the other night. And I used my hands to show him the size of what we saw. His mouth dropped. I've never heard of anything like that in my entire life in the Dominican Republic, but who knows what comes out of the jungle. Now, it wasn't until a little while later that my husband, while discussing Harry, our pet name for the spider, realized that I had only seen half of it. My estimate of a 10-inch leg plus 10-inch leg for the total of about 20 inches or 2 feet was severely off. He saw the whole body, and the body minus legs was as wide as the entire hand, a grown man's hand. So it likely was way bigger than a 2 foot diameter. He also said that there were multiple big black eyes. I have since gone on numerous arachnid websites and have even contacted arachnologists to try to identify what we saw. Most of them came back suggesting a Mexican spider. I forget the name of it now. That might have somehow gotten to Dominican Republic in someone's luggage. But that spider is not what we saw. What we saw was uh, Spiderosaurus rex. Now, this next witness states, I had debated some time on whether to submit this experience and finally decided what the heck. In August of 2012, my wife and I took a long awaited trip to the Big Island, Hawaii. The trip there was uneventful. Left from Oklahoma City, stopped at DFW, then LAX, and finally we arrived at Kona International Airport. We picked up our luggage, grabbed the rental, and headed to the resort. Upon arrival, we found this resort to be very lovely, and it was just as we pictured. Check-in went smoothly, and we were walked up the small path to our condo. 2 beds, 2 baths, a living room, a huge lano, full kitchen, and 2-person garden tub. Now, after unpacking, I noted it was around 2 p.m. We were exhausted as our flight left Oklahoma City the previous night. We decided to take a nap before starting our adventuring. My wife laid down on the bed and I adjusted the AC. I walked into the bedroom from the hallway thermostat. Just as I stepped into the room, I heard a noise from the living room, and it sounded like somebody dropped a stack of magazines. I grudgingly walked into the living area to pick up a mess. I couldn't find anything askew. There was a stack of magazines on the small coffee table, but they were on the table, not the floor. I looked for a minute, then just shrugged it off, and I laid down on the bed. I was almost asleep when I heard the bedroom door close. I figured my wife needed a drink. I turned over to see her lying in the bed next to me. Now, I immediately went into attack mode. It was 2:15 p.m. I jumped stealthily out of the bed and grabbed my pocket knife from the dresser. I was trained to use a knife a long time ago, so I was confident I could stop an attacker unless they had a gun. I approached the door. It opened silently. I peered out, ready to strike. Nothing. I systematically searched the condo. Nothing. I'm a reasonable fellow. My wife is very reasonable herself. We decided the pressure from the AC switching on had closed the door. I laid down again. Before my eyes, the door began to close. It silently and gently shut until the mechanism was in contact with the door jamb. I laughed to myself, thinking of how I reacted. The door violently slammed itself shut. I shot out of bed and promptly opened the door. I stood and watched it for 5 minutes. It didn't budge. I walked back to bed and sat down. the door rapidly closed, slamming itself shut. I remember getting the chills. My wife leaned in behind me and peered at the door. I stood and blurted out loud, "In the name of Jesus Christ, be gone from here. You are not welcome. Get out." I immediately felt the room begin to warm. Things were normal once again. It was 2:23 p.m. My wife and I prayed for protection and finally slept peacefully. We are both people of great faith. We knew that whatever it was had been forced out. I believe our faith was keeping it at bay. We were there for 14 days. Nothing further occurred until the last day of the trip. It was around 10 p.m. when I was packing and watching a series called Haunted Highway. My wife was already asleep. I finished packing and lay down. The television was concealed inside a large built in wardrobe. The door in front of the television opened and lay flat against the wall. There was even a small latch that kept it in place, and it had not moved the entire time we had been there. I watched it slowly close, shut, and latch. I calmly got up and opened the door so I could finish my program. I stepped back and the door began to rapidly close. I jumped forward, caught the door, and said, "Get out." I pushed the door open again, latched it in place, and lay down. I prayed again and went to sleep. I had very violent and frightening dreams all night. I woke up exhausted and found the wardrobe was still open as I had left it. We loaded our car and left that place behind. I was glad to be on the plane headed home. I still break out in goosebumps and my hair stands on end each time I recount and relive the experience. My wife and I believe in the supernatural, but this was a first for us. I believe that what was in our condo was demonic. Its whole purpose was to shake our faith. All it succeeded in doing was making us stronger. On a side note, I had been to Oahu many times because my sister used to live there. I never experienced anything like that before. When I shared the experience with my sister, she just sat there silently. She looked at her husband, and they both said that they had similar experiences when they first moved to Oahu. They hadn't told anyone because they were afraid of ridicule. Now, native Hawaiians have long believed in spirits that would attack haoles who were visiting the island. Now, the haole thing, that's kind of a euphemism that the natives call vacationers. You know, I've heard similar stories from people who have traveled to Hawaii. Actually, an NFL player who was in Hawaii for the Pro Bowl several years ago relayed to me encounters that he and other player had with a less than friendly spirit in a hotel suite. And to make a long story short, they didn't get much sleep during their stay and vowed to never return to Hawaii. Maybe the vengeful native entities are getting a little payback for past atrocities. Now, a reader contacted me about their family trip to Point Pleasant, West Virginia, and the TNT igloos to gather unexplained evidence. Like many investigators, the flapping wing sounds were noted. He states, "Hello, Mr. Strickler. I just watched your Unsolved Mysteries episode. I thought you'd be interested in this incident. I went to Point Pleasant, West Virginia in August 2015 with my hubby and kids. We traveled going to odd places, haunted, etc. We found that some call the TNT igloos at the old West Virginia Ordnance plant. We were on a back dirt road. The sun was setting. An odd car would drive by slowly as we were getting our gear ready. I joked about the scary movies you see and how the locals hate out of towners and take it out on them, that people go missing and are captured. Okay, back to reality. Time to press on. It's getting dark. We got our flashlights and EMF meters. I went over the directions I saw on the internet, pond to the left, look for an opening on the right of the trail. There were so many weeds and overgrowth that it was hard to find. Then one of my kids yelled, "There it is." I saw a pathway about 20 feet long to my right. The weeds were shaped like a tunnel, probably from us tourists pulling and lifting them and to get through. All four of us girls would have to duck and run through quickly after my hubby checks for spiders and webs, of course. Now we got into the TNT igloo, and you could see a ton of graffiti and garbage and a dirt bottom. It was pitch black at this point, and only the light from our dollar store flashlights. We tried to take a photo with our tablet, but they were all black. We started talking and playing with our echo. Then I told everyone, quiet, I hear something. We listened, hearing, and we all heard a noise. My kids started getting scared. My hubby, a big man he is, said, it's time to go now. I didn't want to leave. I was there to explore. My family left me, running back to the car. I was alone in the igloo. When I got in the car, we drove off. I asked everyone what it sounded like to them, the noise in and around the igloo. Everyone said wings flapping, big wings flapping above. Now, my daughter's sensitive. She said that she saw a shadow man in the woods in a weird orb. Well, we came and left in one piece, mission accomplished. Now, I've gathered various EVP recordings from many trips to the West Virginia Ordnance Works. The flapping wing sound has been reported by several investigators over time. I have heard it as well, and I believe that there's a very strong guardian spirit, and I've talked about this before, of a native origin at that location. Over time, summoned the wing humanoid for protection. Now, an Ohio woman and her mother are spending a weekend at a secluded cabin near Houston Woods State Park. During their stay, they witnessed a yellow eyed glimmer man in the trees. Mortal Clown, thank you for your donation. Much appreciated. She states, I and my mom traveled to Oxford, Ohio for a long weekend stay in a secluded cabin near Houston Woods State Park that forever changed our perception of reality. The owner had remodeled the cabin several months before. The cabin was built into the side of a hill with a garage constructed underneath. Now, the cabin was equipped with a screened deck that from the outside looked as though it was off a second floor, but actually it was off the main floor of the residence. The deck held a table and chairs as well as a generously sized hot tub. The way the deck is lifted, it had a beautiful, beautiful view. I turned the jacuzzi on to get warmed up and ready for us to enjoy. I was in the hot tub while my mother was sitting at the table. My mom held her finger up and said, do you hear that? I didn't hear anything over the bubbling water. Mom used her phone light to look around and didn't see anything in the dark of the night. A few minutes later, I got out and dried off sitting at the table with my mom to drink some hot cocoa. I asked her what was wrong. She shook her head, saying the forest sounds just stopped or kind of stopped. Oh my gosh, you're right, I replied, as I realized I no longer heard the crickets or frogs chirping. After an hour or so, we decided to go to bed. So the next day, we decided to explore the area around the cabin and noticed the ground was damp from an overnight shower. We walked about 100 feet or so from the cabin, and Mom noticed two strange footprints having 3 toes. She pointed it out to me. They were a couple feet away from each other. We spent another hour looking around and then headed back for lunch. So that night, as we enjoyed the hot tub, we heard a loud screeching scream come from somewhere outside the cabin. I jumped up and turned out the light on the deck so we couldn't be seen and we would have better view outside the tub so that we could hear better as well. Soon we heard branches breaking and other movement. But the strangest part was that the sounds were coming from the forest canopy, not from the ground. It sounded as if something heavy was climbing a tree not far from the cabin. We both stood back against the wall close to the door that goes inside. We could hear something really big, but couldn't see anything. Now, as we were getting ready to go inside, we saw a set of yellow glowing eyes looking at us from a branch level with the deck about 30 foot away. We ran inside, slammed the door, and praying we were safe. Not sure if we should call someone, we decided to sit inside after making sure the doors were all locked. We stayed up for another hour and I didn't hear anything else, so we just went to bed. So the next morning after breakfast, we went outside to look around the cabin where we thought the noises had been coming from. Other than a few large branches lying on the trail, we didn't see anything out of the ordinary. We decided to go on with our day and drove over to the lake after some more sightseeing and dinner. We went back to the cabin and went out to the deck and played cards over coffee. It was dusk, so we could still see a fair distance. Now, as we were talking, Mom noticed everything had gone quiet again. She asked me if I noticed nature sounds had stopped. I listened and realized Mom was right. Soon the sound of the branches breaking started again, and this time was moving closer to the cabin. Turning out the light and watching the trees as the noise got closer, we were shocked at what we saw. The branches were moving as if something large was on them, but it didn't look like anything was there. But then we got a glimpse of what we had been hearing. In the trees was what looked like a large human shape, but it was nearly invisible. It looked like a moving heat wave shaped like a tall person. We watched it in disbelief as the large entity moved through the trees. We didn't want to move so it wouldn't see us, not knowing its intentions. After a few minutes, it had moved away from our location. We waited a couple of minutes after not hearing anything and stepped inside. We discussed leaving at night instead of in the morning, but it was getting late, and once we packed everything up, it would be dark, so we decided to stay until the morning. We gathered all our belongings so everything would be ready to come morning and went to bed. I woke up to use the bathroom at 4 a.m. And as I was on my way back to bed, I heard what sounded like loud footsteps. Still being kind of groggy, I was trying to decipher where the sounds were coming from, and when I realized they were coming from the roof, I ran in and woke Mom up, whispering what I had heard. She sat on the couch quietly praying and talking until morning light when I peeked outside after not hearing anything for some time. I saw nothing, so we quickly grabbed our belongings and put them in the car. As we were getting into the car, I saw a dirty three-toed print on the hood of the car. As I drove away, I looked towards the back of the cabin and saw the creature's yellow eyes staring back. I drove away as quickly and as safely as possible. Now, I did some research once, settled back at home, and tried to find some answers to we had witnessed, and found several reports from around the U.S. and state parks and other wooded areas of a similar being that had been dubbed Glimmer Man, the title referring to an odd, nearly invisible quality of creature. This was a trip I will never forget. Now, an experiencer recalls her encounter with a reptilian when she was a young girl while on vacation and visiting Mount Capulin, New Mexico. She experienced other strange encounters as well. Hi, Lon. I just watched your recent podcast about reptilians. Ready is a term that has shown up in many stories about close encounters of the third kind. I'm very much on my guard for when this word shows up because I've had an encounter with which the word was spoken to me by a reptilian. In August 1959, my parents and I were traveling to Colorado Springs on a vacation. This was before my 11th birthday on August 19th. For some unknown reason, Dad decided that we would stop and visit Mount Capulin, an extinct volcano in the northeast corner of New Mexico. Mom stayed in the tour center while Dad and I climbed up the side of the volcano and down into the crater. Then we returned to the center. I had a desperate need to use the bathroom. Now, as I was walking through the center, I felt myself stop in mid-step. I felt my mind lift out of my body and drop straight through the floor. How deep, I couldn't imagine. My drop ended in an arched tunnel deep underground. The tunnel was lighted with orange lights. Standing in front of me was a smallish being or entity that I now know to identify as a reptilian. I would estimate its height at somewhere around 4 foot tall. It was wearing a gray color robe with long sleeves and a hood. The most I could see of its face was intense, oversized, dark eyes. In its left hand, a number of fingers unclear, but a thumb, it held something that we today would describe as an iPod or the like. In its right hand, it held some type of stylus. It looked straight at me and with mind to mind talk said, "What are you doing here? We're not ready for you yet." Then my mind zoomed back up through the ground and back into my head where I stood in the tourist center. Immediately, I double timed it to the ladies' room and got relief just in time. Since then, I have lived wondering what that we had, the entity had represented, uh, or and would it be ready for me? I have had other encounters with UFO related entities like the MIB dressed in a black warrant officer uniform, driving a yellow Mini Cooper on a military base near Kluvatic, Iceland. He told me, "Go home," and pointed towards the southwest and North America. Anyway, maybe the aliens and entities have visited me and I don't remember it. But thanks for letting me tell my story. Now, this next account's got a little bit of French in it, so I do know some French, but uh, please excuse my translation and my pronunciation. Now, a married couple is on a 7-day Caribbean cruise. At the port of call in Saint Martin, they took a private catamaran to a small island where they find an old gold ring. Soon afterwards, things become interesting. The witness tells me, "Hello, my husband and I had an experience that we just cannot explain. An associate at work suggested I write you so that you and your readers may be able to help us comprehend what has happened and if we are in any peril. In autumn 2007, my husband and I took a 7-day cruise vacation that left from Port Canaveral, Florida, with ports of call in the Eastern Caribbean. We needed a break because of work stress and the constant activity endured by us helping to plan our daughter's wedding. The cruise was going along nicely and as anticipated. Now, the final port of call was Phillipsburg, St. Martin's. I was looking forward to this destination since my sister had visited there previously. We have arranged for a catamaran sail as part of our day long stop at the port. Now, after walking around the town for a few hours, we reached the tour company that provided the catamaran ride to a small island a few miles from Phillipsburg. It was a delightful excursion to and from the island with food and drink, as well as pleasant interaction with the crew. But there was one aspect of this small trip that needs to be emphasized. My husband and I took a walk on the beach of this small island. I forget the name of the island. And for a while decided to take a breather on a small outcrop of rocks. We sat and talked about dinner that evening and hoped we'd be able to be seated at a nice local restaurant since we had not made a reservation. As we talked, my husband noticed something between several of the rocks. He reached down to pull up a large ring that looked very old and seemed to be made of gold. We examined it and noticed that the design on the face was that of a bird and what looked like a lightning bolt. There was an inscription inside the band that read, "Me voir croire avec vous, Manon 1723," which translates into "My heart sails with you, Manon 1723." My husband, who is a high school history teacher, speculated that it may have belonged to a French privateer at one time. He said that he waited and that he'd wait and have it looked at when we returned home to Chicago. He placed it in his pocket and we continued with our day. We spent the late evening in our cabin relaxing as our cabin balcony on our cabin balcony and conversing about our trip. So the next morning, there was a knock on our cabin door. I looked at the clock. It was 7:15 a.m. My husband got up and answered the door. He was talking to our cabin steward, whose voice I recognized. We invited him inside, but he was quite distressed. He explained that the couple in the cabin beside ours had a terrible experience the previous evening, and they insisted that we were responsible. Oh, we were very surprised by the information because we had never met this couple. The cabin steward explained that the couple did not want to cause trouble, but they insisted that they talk to us. We agreed to meet them. About an hour later, after we had showered and had some breakfast, we walked next door to the couple's cabin. The cabin steward accompanied us. A young woman answered the door, introduced herself to us, and asked that we sit down. She was very nervous. I asked if anyone else would be talking to us. She explained that her companion was very wary of us and wanted to avoid our presence. My husband and I looked at each other in amazement. What had we done to incite fear in this couple? A few seconds later, my husband motioned for me to look at the dresser. I turned and looked. The ring we had found the previous day was on their dresser. My husband turned to the young woman and asked, "Does this ring belong to you?" She started to cry. Then she shouted, "Take it back and leave." My husband stood up and said, "Wait 1 second," as he turned towards the door and walked out. I knew where he was going. He was looking for the ring in our cabin. I looked at the young woman and said, "Look, what's going on here?" She didn't answer. The cabin steward suspected what was happening and said, "If there is a theft, I need to report it." I asked him to wait until my husband returned. Soon after, my husband walked back into the cabin and said, "It's gone." The young woman looked up and said, "Yeah, we took it last night." After assuring her that we would not report or prosecute the theft, she calmed down and explained what had happened. The young woman stated that the previous evening she and her companion were walking back to their cabin when they noticed my husband and I were getting ready to enter our cabin. My husband had reached into his pocket to retrieve the key card, and when he did, the ring somehow came out and fell to the floor. Neither one of us had noticed it, but the couple both saw it hit the floor and bounce over to the opposite wall. After we had entered our cabin, the couple picked up the ring and decided it was theirs now. As she continued to describe what had happened, she became very emotional as tears rolled down her face. She explained that after they had gone to sleep, the cabin lit up as bright as the morning sun, so bright that it woke both of them. Then they noticed deep, horrific growling sounds coming from across the cabin near the sofa. As they watched, a woman in a billowy pink dress began to manifest before them. They were terrified and unable to speak or move. The apparition moved towards them and hovered above the bed. As its bright yellow eyes gazed upon them, a voice rang out, "Donnez, monsieur, son anneau," and said it again, and translated as, "Give my lord his ring." The specter continued to speak the same words until it finally faded away and the room turned dark. "Now, take the ring and leave. I beg you not to report this." I looked at the cabin steward. He was in shock, holding a rosary and praying under his breath. My husband said, "Let's go." He grabbed the ring and we walked back to our cabin. We talked about the ring and what we would do with it. We contemplated throwing it back into the ocean. Then we wondered if there was historical value and if we had to donate, we could donate to a museum or maybe a university. So that was 5 months ago, and we still possessed the ring. My husband said that he would like to have it researched, but has not done anything as of yet. The ring is in a safety deposit box and will remain there, just in case some of the young woman's story was true. And I never received a follow-up from the witnesses, so I guess they still got the ring in the safety deposit box, and that was a while ago. So, Quite a creepy story. So, this next account, a man and his family are traveling on I 95 south towards Florida. While in North Carolina, a trailer pulls in front of them, and the driver observes a large wing horned silhouette. The witness states, "We were driving home from our vacation in Florida. It was on Saturday, June 3rd, 2016. Just after dinner, around 8 p.m., we were passing through North Carolina on I 95. I was cruising along at around 70 mile an hour when I noticed a large camper in my rearview mirror. I moved to the right lane and thought nothing more of the vehicle as it passed me on the left. The interior was lit up and all the blinds were down. I saw several silhouettes of people as the camper pulled ahead of and in front of my vehicle. As the camper began to pull away, someone stood up in the back, closed the rear door, and all of a sudden, a large pair of wings unfolded from the person's shoulder blade area. They were wide and membranous, with claws at the couple of points along the top edge. They reminded me of pterodactyl wings or thin bat wings. I could see enough light through them to make out the wing bones. That's not all. At the top of the man's head were two small curved horns. My thought was that it was a gargoyle. I was shocked, to say the least. My family was asleep at the time. The wings appeared to be real, pulsing and flexing as the person or humanoid moved through the front of the camper. As I wondered what to do next, the camper pulled off and exited and disappeared. And to this day, I swear it was a being with real wings." Okay, I got one more account here. The witnesses tell me, "Hello. Well, this is my written encounter with the infamous Robert the Doll. My detailed account is the meeting and later encounter with the spirit or entity attached to the doll, then an explanation of any bad luck that has happened. Everything that happened is real. I experienced it while awake. I was on no substances that could cause an hallucination or have ever partaken in anything that would be considered a drug or illegal substance. You choose what you believe, but my eyes saw what they saw and I heard what I heard. I went on vacation with my family to Key West a few years ago. We decided to go to the museum to visit, and I honestly did want to see Robert in person because I had read about him before. I took a picture at one point that had him in the background. It was not a direct picture in front of him. This was enough to get his attention, though, but I did delete the picture later and it no longer exists. When he visited me, this means the entity moved from the doll. I heard laughing and turned on the light to see the metal pull cord to the fan spinning around like someone had pulled it or was messing around it. This was the extent of any interaction I had with this entity away from the doll itself. Nothing happened while I was in the museum or during the day up to that point. Now, since taking the picture and the visit, I have not had anything that I could call unfortunate or terrible in a life ruining way. I have a nice job that I like now, and life has been normal. I think there is a chance Robert may know when someone makes a mistake or is intentionally going up to take a picture with full knowledge of what they are doing. If you play with fire, in this case, you probably get burned." Now, my late wife and I went to the Fort East Martello Museum in Key West back in July 2004. Honestly, I didn't sense much energy and malevolent intent associated with the doll, although there were a few other exhibits in the museum that kind of bothered me more than Robert. Um, so I'd be interested if any of you have had an encounter with a malevolent entity or believe this story. So that's all I have. So folks, you have questions, put them up there, all caps, and we'll go from there. Any questions, folks? Any comments? Our friend Brett Thomas is in tonight. Thanks, thanks, Brett. Thanks for joining us. You can hear Brett show after our show. Uh, I think it starts at 10 Eastern. I'm not sure. Dagnammit, have you heard of a family of shimmering invisible heat wave humanoids living in a Washington state park in the Pacific Northwest? I've not heard of a family. I've heard of a lot of solitary beings, the Glimmerman beings, very similar to what is depicted in the Predator movies. It's a phenomenon that myself and the guys over at uh, uh, well, it's put Kyle and Cam over at Unexplained Perspective. Is that what it is? I don't know. I forget what the name of the show is, but anyway, we're actually writing a book. We're writing a book about the encounters that were sent to us from people who had encounters with these Glimmermen. We're getting it finalized now, and it should be ready in a couple months. Then we'll send it to the editor. So you can expect to see that a little bit down the road. I don't know if there's any other books about the Glimmermen or not, but we decided we'd go ahead and write one and publish it. Marla Snyder, what are your thoughts on what Glimmerman is? God, I wish I knew. There are people who swear that it's a Bigfoot, a type of Bigfoot that's or a Bigfoot that's actually cloaking itself. Others think it's like the movie, some type of alien being. I have had sightings all over the country, a few overseas. I don't know exactly what it is, but pretty disconcerting for those folks who have had the encounter. I had a woman just outside of Gettysburg had an encounter with one a couple of years ago, and boy, she freaked out. She first thought it was a ghost, something to do with the battle, but it was definitely a glimmer man after she watched it for a while. Expanded perspectives. Thank you, Marla. My head's on wrong tonight. I appreciate that. Yeah, so Cal and Cam and I are writing a book about the Glimmerman. Any more questions? Jose Sanchez. Andrew said he saw Dogman in Triangle Group of Three. Have you heard of them being in groups like that before? It's very rare. I've only ever had one encounter report to me of two beings being together. Um, and that was at a distance, and they did separate when the encounter happened, but the witness did see them together at a distance. Uh, yeah, that's interesting. If Andrew does have that account, he wants to write it down and send it to me. I'd appreciate it. Jose Sanchez, are those Glimmermen similar to the Nightcrawlers? Totally different. These beings are almost invisible. They seem to have some type of supernatural aspect to them, to where they can easily move around in the trees. Most of the time, they're seen in trees, but it's not like the Fresno Nightcrawler. I see Sir Wolf is asking, do you think Bigfoot can cloak? Controversial. I really don't know. I believe that the Bigfoot is a supernatural being for the most part. Now, of course, I think they're indigenous beings, as I said before, and I think there are some that are portal travelers. They're able to move between dimensions, just like I believe the Mothman and a few other cryptids can do. I don't know. All I can say is, listen to the accounts, read the book, and decide for yourself. Dagnammit, Mount Shasta has a number of these holographic, projected disguised doorways that you don't know that are even there. It looks like a normal side of a mountain. Yeah, I know a couple people who go to Mount Shasta every year, including uh, Ray Keller, who's part of the team. He's our ufology expert and investigator. He goes and visits the location every year, and I get a good story every time I talk to him about it. Maybe I can get ready to come on one day. Leecham, the spicy lizard. Have you noticed any high concentrate of the phenomena with certain vacation destinations, foreign or domestic, Hawaiian, Caribbean, Mexico, Italy? Now, nothing in particular. I mean, there's a lot of places that have a lot of hauntings and a lot of crazy stuff that goes on. Um, no place in particular, but I do know there are a lot of sightings in Hawaii. If you ever heard of anything about the night marchers, that's a pretty weird phenomena. Um, I tell you what, go into Google and search night watchers, or go to my website and search night watchers, and the stories will come up. It's very well known. The residents know all about the whole thing, where hundreds of these things show up sometimes in a straight line walking down the beach. Jose Sanchez, might they be using technology to appear to make them transparent as military has? I don't know. I don't know what technology they have. Is it like what's in the movie where they hit that little thing on the wrist and they vanish? I don't know. Anything else? Well, folks, thanks for each and all of you for watching and chatting. If you donate, it's truly appreciated. Your support is what makes this all possible. So please like, subscribe, and share. If you have a sighting or encounter report that you'd like to be considered for the personal report show or posted on the Fans of Monsters blog, feel free to forward to my email at lonstricklerphantomsandmonsters.com. So until we meet again, stay healthy and safe. Have a great weekend, and I'll talk to you next Friday night. Good night.